have given you a sketchbook that I'm asking you to fill over the course of the summer. And for many of you, as I handed you that book, that was met with excitement, which is great. As artists, it's important for us to keep a sketchbook, to keep a place for our thoughts and things that interest us. And a sketchbook is a place to do that. Okay, so it's important for you to think of your sketchbook as a diary or as a visual journal. I'm going to post a link to a Pinterest board that I have made that has examples of all different types of sketchbooks by all different types of artists, because every artist obviously has a little different style, and they have a different mission when they're working in their sketchbook. There is no wrong way to do it. The only wrong way to use a sketchbook is for your sketchbook to stay blank. I have a stack of some of my old sketchbooks here. I have a bin of old sketchbooks in my different types of sketchbooks over the years. I used to always prefer this style of sketchbook with the spiral binding. And let's see, which ones of these is older? I very often would use, so this one's pretty old, planning sketch for a mural. Very often would use markers, sometimes just a ballpoint pen, sometimes a pencil. So you can see some of the pages are more interesting than others. This sketchbook is from 10 years ago, you guys. Oh my gosh. But as I started working more in watercolor, this particular sketchbook has really thin sheets, and it started not working out for me. So I switched then. So you can see I have another one of these. A lot of pencil, a lot of pen. This is when I start working in a little bit of watercolor, and this paper is not great for watercolor work at all. So I shifted at this point away from this style of sketchbook to a sketchbook that had some heavier paper, but still this kind of spiral binding, because that's what I was most comfortable with. So you can kind of see over the years how much artwork kind of changes, right? Some of my sheets in my sketchbook are going to feel, super finished, right? Super finished little painting. Others are thoughts, ideas. This is notes from a botanical drawing talk that I went to. So it talked about the different sorts of shapes that were involved in plants, and then we had plants that we could draw while we were there. And like I said, you can kind of see, like, some of my pages feel more finished. There's almost always words, there's notes. Sometimes it's notes about the day that I'm having. Sometimes it's notes about what I'm sketching. So here I was at the Shepherd's Festival and was sketching the animals that were there. So I have notes about what color, what their personality was like, what happened that I didn't finish a sketch. So you can see when you're sketching live animals, not everyone cooperates for long, right? Here I'm playing around with a different style of pen. This is a new pen to me. Never used it before. And so you can see that I'm kind of switching back and forth between those two different kinds of pens. And still switching back and forth. So you can see there's no wrong way to keep a sketchbook, but you can see my pages are fairly full, right? Here I've glued in the business card of the woman who owned these two. She gave it to me. I sent her a photograph of the sketch because she saw me drawing in the barn and had asked for it. Here too, this is a fun way to use your watercolor, is to kind of put some watercolor in a background of just a plain sketch, and you can see that that kind of adds a fun component. Now you start to see where I'm starting to use more watercolor. I'm teaching myself actually at this point how to use watercolor paint, and I'm kind of playing around with it. So you can see some of the pages have more notes, some of the pages have more pictures, some of the pages have a lot of writing and a painting from my imagination, where, you know, this page is a painting while I'm sitting and painting in my garden. So it's kind of a combination of different things. This is all collage. So there is really no wrong way for you to keep a sketchbook. It kind of can come and go. Here I'm testing colors in a new palette. You can see I've taken notes someplace. Lots and lots of different things in my sketchbooks over time. As I move along, I start making my own sketchbooks. So here's an example of a sketchbook that I made, and it has watercolor paper in it. Doesn't mean that I always use watercolor, as you can see, but very often watercolor is my go-to in my sketchbook. Very often drawing things that are around me, things that are easily accessible, things that I can look at. You can see here, these I must have meant to glue in here. They are stuck in here. This sketchbook is from 2014, so this one's been sitting on my shelf for a while. I had a neighbor who had chickens. We would go sit and draw the chickens. Loads of good fun. And sometimes sketches don't work out, like, right? I really don't like this sketch. It says, don't like the painting, should have left the sketch alone. But that's sort of the beauty of having a sketchbook. It can be your place to kind of play around and feel like you're making some mistakes. Here's an example of, you know, a drawing that I did. Looks like with a red pen or red colored pencil. And then I'm testing some paints. So I have, looks like I was at a friend's house and I was testing her paints because they were different than my paints. And then played around with those. So don't be afraid to kind of play around in your sketchbook. This is a sketchbook that I took with me to Washington, D.C. It's a little different style sketchbook. And I filled the whole sketchbook while I was there on vacation for a couple of days. So you can see any of these sketches, I was actually standing and saw these things and sketched those things while I was there. So sculptures, the White House, etc. So don't be afraid to take your sketchbook someplace. Don't be afraid to experiment in your sketchbook. Things don't always work out, and that's totally normal. Sometimes you'll spend an hour or more on a page, and sometimes it's going to be quick and 15 minutes. So, and then always just remember that it's your diary, right? I have all these notes about this pileated woodpecker that I sat and drew while I was visiting my parents. Here I'm at a staff meeting, so I'm drawing the teacher who's sitting in front of me. These are notes from a lesson. Here's just me playing with some colors, more notes from things, and then working with some layered watercolor. So sketchbooks are definitely the place for you to kind of mess around and play around, experiment with different things, but also take notes. Don't be afraid to pull random stuff out of your fridge to draw. Don't be afraid to glue extra paper in. Sometimes you're not at home and you can draw on a different sheet of paper and you can glue that in after the fact. You can also get creative and glue in whole sheets. Like this is just glued in this upper corner so that the sheet itself can fit inside my book. You can also glue in little things like this. So this envelope is glued in here and then taped in here with washi tape. and some little, we call these artist trading cards. So they're tiny little pieces of artwork made while we're hanging out with other friends, and they are in this packet. So lots of fun things that you can do with a sketchbook. It kind of becomes the record of your life, of your journey. This also becomes a way for us to look back at the things that visually interest you, right? Here's me playing around with these two new colors that I just bought. So I just bought these colors and playing around. Let's see, I have a personal goal in here to work more on figures and faces and draw, less plants. So you can see I draw a lot of plants. The reason I draw a lot of plants and a lot of vegetables is that I always have them at my house. I can go downstairs right now and I can throw peaches on the counter and I can paint the counter, paint the peaches. Or I can go outside into my garden and I can paint whatever's happening out there in my garden. So it ends up being kind of what I have available to draw. My cat in a box. So make sure you're thinking about your sketchbook that way, that it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be perfect pages. Sometimes you can just goof around with things. Mind maps, this is collage. Notes while I'm watching a YouTube video. Like it ends up being all sorts of things. Some pages are pretty, some pages are not, right? So here's an example of a pretty page. Playing around with like doing some responsive writing and then some collage and paint. This is not such a pretty page. I am testing out 2 different paints and the gray that they make. They make a really great black, but the page is kind of a messy page. Here's notes on making another book, right? So know that sometimes it's fine if things aren't so fantastic in your sketchbook. There will always be pages that are amazing and always be pages that aren't amazing. Another way to think about a sketchbook is I have this sketchbook in my studio and it is just a painting and collage sketchbook. I have a spot here for a title page, and this is a little guy that was collaged in. Because I'm using acrylic paint in this sketchbook, the pages kind of stick together. So you can see I have some drawing, but a lot of what's in here is just paint and little things that I find. Again, sometimes drawing, but a lot of times, whoops, this guy doesn't belong in here. He is should be on a different page. But this is just done with some jelly plates. So we probably play around with those if you're signed up for the summer camp. But I'm playing around a lot in here with collage, with some stamps, with some paint. And this is definitely a completely different way to keep a sketchbook. It's still mine. It's still my life. It's just a little bit different. So you can see that this one feels really different from the other sketchbooks that I have. This one also is one that I don't work in as often. I'll just pull it out every once in a while and add something to a page. This obviously got drawn someplace else and could probably get glued down there. See? So this book is kind of a long-term work in progress. You'll notice there aren't any dates on the pages. I'm just sort of working on them as I have time or as I find a little something that I think would work in this book. So that's another thing for you to think about. There are no wrong ways to make artwork in your sketchbook. You just need to have fun and make sure that you're using it.